Good morning, everyone. Attorney Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch here. Tuesdays live with you on all the platforms to talk through immigration news and updates, the reality of what's happening, not just what they're saying on the news or the talking points. And I'll also answer some of your live questions about your immigration cases. I have a bunch of questions here that have been submitted over the last week by people on the social media platforms, but I am also going to prioritize your live questions. As a reminder, my law firm, Lincoln-Goldfinch Law, offers immigration services. We bring peace of mind and security for your family, and we can represent people all over the 50 United States and really all over the globe. We're not restricted geographically because immigration is federal law, and we are a virtual law firm. So we are able to represent people in all 50 states and would be happy to help you or the people that you love make sure that they keep their families intact in these difficult times. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and launch into the news of the week. There have been some developments in Supreme Court cases. The Supreme Court has issued a couple of rulings, one good, one bad. The bad is related to TPS for Venezuelans. So what happened with TPS is that 350,000 or so people from Venezuela have TPS status. That stands for temporary protected status. This is a program by which people who are from a country who are inside the United States and they can't return to their country because of some natural disaster or some type of infrastructure collapse or political situation, they get protection here in the United States, where we say, you know what, everybody from Venezuela who's been here since March of 2023, for now is protected against deportation. They don't have to go home. So we've had TPS for Venezuelans, many of whom also are eligible for asylum, for example, or maybe other types of cases that they've been here under protection. Well, the Trump administration revoked TPS. It's set to cancel. And there was a lawsuit that was filed in the federal court system on the West Coast, which tends to be a little more pro-immigrant. That judge issued a nationwide stay against the cancellation, which was great. A lot of Venezuelans were celebrating, like, we're protected. What a stay means is that while the lawsuit is pending in the federal court system, the policy does not go into effect, right? Because it would cause harm. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court disagreed with the lower federal court, and they said, actually, the stay is lifted, the cancellation can go through, therefore TPS can be canceled while the litigation is pending. And, notably, TPS Venezuelans with TPS, Tipaceanos they call them, are going to lose status and potentially be detained and or deported. And as we know, Venezuelans face a special risk of harm and mistreatment and lack of due process by the Trump administration, because that's what we've seen in other cases. So it's more critical than ever that Venezuelans who are in TPS make sure you consult with immigration lawyers about what other options you have. Maybe it's asylum, maybe it's an employment case, maybe it's a family-based case. There's really lots of different ways that people can immigrate legally, but what you don't want to do is let your TPS lapse and not have a plan B, because immigration knows who you are. They know where you live. They're looking to boost their numbers. They're accusing Venezuelans of being gang members and lawbreakers, etc. And I don't trust that the Trump administration is not going to immediately go after specifically Venezuelans who lost TPS as easy, low-hanging fruit for them, for people they can go find and arrest and deport to third countries, like El Salvador or Libya. It's bad. So please, Venezuelans and TPS, make sure that you are consulting with immigration lawyers about your second option. So that was the first ruling out of the Supreme Court. Not great. Not great. We didn't like to see that. On the other hand, the Supreme Court issued or reiterated, doubled down on their block on deportations under the Alien Enemies Act, right? This is the way that the Trump administration deported those 3 planes of Venezuelans to El Salvador. And I will just note, all of those people remain in El Salvador. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, let's not forget his name. He remains in El Salvador. He is Salvadoran, but he was under protection not to be returned there. And in all of the mania of the news cycles and the other zany things that the Trump administration is doing, and Biden having cancer and all of that stuff, it's easy to lose track of the things that we need to keep top of mind. Kilmar, Abrego Garcia, and the Venezuelans who were deported to CCOT are still there. Let's not forget them. But also, I'm happy to report that the Supreme Court is continuing the block on removals of Venezuelans under the Alien Enemy Act to El Salvador. So that is, it's a temporary move until the Fifth Circuit can rule, But if you dive into the details of the decision, it's becoming clear that the Supreme Court is tiring a little bit of the actions of the Trump administration, particularly as they relate to these removals to El Salvador. They're kind of not having it at this point. So I think that that's a good sign of what's going on with the Supreme Court, at least in terms of like due process and deportations. Let's see what else. So TPS ended for Afghans as well. And as we know, that the refugee program was suspended. Many Afghans who had assisted U.S. military, had their flights canceled. And then that horrific spectacle of the Afrikaners being invited on a chartered plane, waving their American flags. The story of the Afrikaners is really upsetting. And there's a New York Times Daily episode this week that if you're interested in like, who are the Afrikaners and what's the history there, I recommend that episode as a way to get caught up. Essentially, Afrikaners were, they're Dutch, sort of Dutch origin, white settlers in South Africa who were primarily responsible for apartheid. And so they were the, ruling class of people that oppressed people of color in South Africa. And then when the tables turned and apartheid went away, white Afrikaners began to, lose some of their power, of course. And the many people on the, sort of Trump followers, Trump's side, have taken up the plight of Afrikaners as like the way that they message it is like, this is what would happen in the US if reparations or DEI were continued to move forth. Like they see Afrikaners as a symbol of what would happen to white people in the United States. And that's why the Trump administration is so loud and supportive of the Afrikaners. And that's why they invited this plane full of people. And the whole thing is just so upsetting and so racist, but also like seeing them come off that plane in like nice clothing with like piles of luggage and all of their belongings was so heartbreaking when you think about the way that most refugees and asylees make their way to this country where they lose everything in their house. They leave their houses behind. Most of the time they leave many of their family members behind. They arrive here with nothing. And it is so impressive that people go through the things that they go through and they get here like that with just a shirt on their back, just because they want a better life and safety. And then the Trump administration comes in and just cancels all of that and just invites this plane load of white Afrikaners with like all of their belongings and all this pomp and circumstance upon their arrival. It really is so upsetting and racist and so blatantly racist. And I do think we should be talking about it and paying attention to it. Sorry, I got a little worked up about that one. That's really sort of it for the news that I want to tell you all about. There's a lot of stuff going on. Like in Illinois, they're considering ending the health program for undocumented immigrants, Medicaid changing in California for immigrants, increase in arrests in Houston, ICE arrests. I've been running some numbers at my firm. This is obviously just my own law firm. We went from having, 10 or 20 people contact us on a monthly basis for detained representation. And that's went up to 130, 150 in March, 160 in April, and tracking toward 170 plus in May. So definitely we're seeing locally more people being detained and needing representation for detention cases. So we're looking into ways that we can expand our offerings to help people. It can be hard to find good detained representation for immigrants. It tends to be obviously an emergency. Everybody's got to act really fast. We've got to stop deportations. We've got to jump in, talk to a lot of the family members. It requires a lot of resources on the part of a law firm to do. And so you'll understand that we're like, for example, in my law firm, where for years we get like maybe 10 calls a month, all of a sudden we're getting 150 calls. We are so far have not been able to respond to the need. So we are prioritizing our current clients and saying our current clients who get picked up get our help, right? And then if we have capacity beyond that, we'll take some of these callers. I'm working on figuring out ways to expand this for people, but just so you know, I'm just a sample of other law firms around the country who do immigration work. So immigrants, I guess the note for immigrants is to form a relationship with a lawyer as soon as you can, where you've hired them maybe even just for a FOIA or a background check or an FBI check, and they know everything about you. They've got your information. They can respond quickly, because some of these deportations are happening so fast. People get picked up and they're removed immediately, and you need an attorney to be able to jump in right away. Okay, then I'm going to get to some of your questions live, and go ahead and keep them coming. I'll prioritize your live questions. En Facebook, Homer Rodriguez, ¿cuánto está tardando la aplicación I-485 under employment authorization? So Homer, I think you're talking about how long does the work permit take when you file the I-485 adjustment of status? It's a green card application. The work permit, the idea is the work permit is supposed to come while you're waiting for the green card to cover you. It's gotten so wonky, though, that the work permit takes sometimes almost as long as the green card. So let's say it takes about a year for the green card from the time you file to the time you get your green card. Usually the work permit is between 6 and 9 months. Okay, so like toward the latter half of the process. Oh, yeah. Okay, so TikTok, we have a comment about someone who can't forget Andrew Hernandez. This was the makeup artist who was falsely deported. Yeah, I mean, the journalism that has come out about the Venezuelans who were sent to El Salvador will break your heart. I mean, more than 50 of those people were in legal status, and they just got picked up off the street and sent to a torture center. I mean, this is such a stain on our history. We will not forget this. People were doing the right thing. They did everything right, and they literally got just picked up and sent to an indefinite prison sentence in another country. It is so shocking that this occurred, and that the administration is doing nothing to bring them back. And so you dive into these individual stories of these people, and it's even more upsetting. I hope that they're being nice to each other, and that they were, I saw a video, I can't remember who it was. It wasn't Vance. It was someone in the Trump administration went to CCOT, and they were like walking the hallway, in front of all of the cells, and all of the Venezuelans were like, ayúdame, like, help me. And it's horrible. And I was glad to see that they were like all together. I think hopefully they are able to be together and help each other, lift each other up, have some solidarity, have some friendship in this horrific place. That's the only thing that we can hope, and that they come home soon. Okay, let's get to some more of these questions. What happens if I miss an immigration check-in because I was afraid or confused about the process? So there's a couple of things. So you have the ICE check-ins and you have the court hearings. When you're in court process, you have to go both to your ICE check-ins and to your court hearings, and you have to update everybody about your address, etc. If you miss a check-in, they're probably going to come get you. They're going to come to your house and find you and detain you and claim that they have a right to detain you now because you weren't compliant. Okay, so not good. It's worse actually if you miss a court date, though, because the judge will order you deported in absentia. Then you have a deportation order, and then ICE will come and get you. So really, it's really important to comply. If you've already missed a check-in, talk to your lawyer, and maybe what we can do is reach out and say, our client missed the check-in. It was a mistake on our part. Can we have a reschedule? And that would hopefully resolve the issue. How long does a family petition take to bring a child or a parent to the U.S.? So if it's an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, which means a child under the age, like if the U.S. citizen is an adult, if the child is under 21, then when the petition is filed, or if the petitioner is an adult and they're petitioning for their parent, then those are just the time of processing of the paperwork, which can be, depending on the consular schedule, like somewhere from a year to 2.5 years total. But if you're talking about the adult child of a U.S. citizen, then the wait time is very, very long. Like for Mexican children of U.S. citizens, that can take 20 years plus, very long time. I use someone else's information when I enter. Does that mean I'm permanently barred from legal status? If you have a false claim to U.S. citizenship, that creates a permanent bar. So if you use someone's birth certificate, like a U.S. citizen birth certificate upon entry, that does create a lifetime bar. But there are certain cases where you can waive those bars, like humanitarian cases, like a trafficking victim, crime victim, domestic violence victim sometimes. So there are some ways that you can waive that bar, but in general, false claim to U.S. citizenship is very serious and can keep you from getting legal status in the future. So be really cautious about like filling out I-9s at new jobs and marking the box that say you're a citizen, or like going to get a driver's license and saying that you're a U.S. citizen, or any official government paperwork. Do not claim U.S. citizenship if you are not a U.S. citizen, because there's really serious penalties from that. Interestingly, if you entered and you used someone's green card, that's not a false claim to U.S. citizenship because that person was a permanent resident. So that does not create the lifetime bar in the same way. Why is Pam Bondi trying to say, this isn't TikTok, tell it like it is. Why is Pam Bondi trying to say she has the right to take away green cards at any given time? It's in the Third Circuit. If you know the name of this case, let me know and I'll look it up. What they're saying in like the Mohsen Madawi case or the Mahmoud Khalil case, those guys are both green card holders. They are using an old ground of deportability. So what happens is permanent residents can still be deportable if they commit certain crimes, or if they're deportable under the Immigration and Nationality Act. There's this old ground of deportability that hasn't been used for decades that says that if someone's activities in the United States create a adverse foreign policy consequences for the U.S. government, then they can be found to be deportable. And so that's the ground of deportability that was used against Mahmoud Khalil, who was the leader of the protests at Columbia University for Palestine. So they're trying to apply this old ground of deportability against permanent residents. My guess is it's that one, but if tell me the name of the case and I'll look it up. Let's see. Noran Sweldan. Oh, and LinkedIn. Okay, hey, I was deported 5 years ago. Can I apply a case for wrongful deportation, get back to the U.S. and revoke the 10-year ban and get compensation for the 2 years of detention time? Let's talk. Will you please send me a DM in LinkedIn and I'll have my team look out for your message. Let's have a consultation. It can be, obviously, as you might imagine, really hard to get recompense for a wrongful deportation, but I'd love to hear more about it and see if there's something that we can do. All right, guys, I've got to wrap a little bit early. I've got an event at my kiddo's school, so hopefully you'll understand, working mom life here. As always, I want to give you an action tip for the week. For the folks who are watching what's going on, you're not an immigration lawyer, you don't exactly know what to do to help, but you want to do something, watch me each week. I'm going to give you a small action item that you can do to make a difference. So let's do this one this week. Why don't you take out your stationery, your little note cards that I know you have stashed away somewhere in your house, write a handwritten thank you note to a teacher, an organizer, or a neighbor who's from another country and who has made a difference in your life, and recognize them, thank them, send them a message, maybe even post about it. I'm thinking specifically about Miss Martasic. She was my Bolivian teacher in 7th grade. She taught me Spanish and she didn't take any of my crap. By that point in my life, I was used to like making excuses and sort of running circles around a lot of my teachers, but she was not having it. She was just teeny tiny and just didn't take any of my shit. And I started doing all my homework and got into Spanish. And really now I have her to thank for like anchoring me in becoming a good student in Spanish. So thank you, Miss Martisic, for changing my life. And I hope you guys all have someone like her and you recognize them this week. Thanks for being here with me. I'll see you on Thursday in Spanish. Adios.